So a while ago I did a video on antagonists and villains and so forth. So I thought that today I would tackle protagonists. Welcome to another episode of Just in Time Worlds with your host, Marie Mullaney. First, what is a protagonist? A protagonist is somebody who moves the plot forward. The word comes to us from Greek and it means the player of the first part or the chief actor. Bear in mind, the protagonist does not need to be the main character. They do not need to be the narrator, and they do not need to be the hero. A hero is a type of protagonist, but not every story has a hero. Every story does need a protagonist. So what are these types of protagonists then? Well, I did mention heroes, so let's talk a little bit about heroes. A hero is the relatable good guy that the audience roots for. An example is Harry Potter, Luke Skywalker, Aang from The Last Airbender, honestly most of fantasy. The hero is pursuing the main goal of the story and generally speaking makes decisions for the betterment of others. Conversely, the anti-hero is your unlikely protagonist. They have both virtues and villainous attributes, and they sometimes make terrible decisions based on just their survival or on their desires. Good examples of anti-villains is the Black Company from the Black Company. They do terrible things when they win battles. They fight on what is arguably the wrong side of the war. The person that they serve comes very close to being the villain at times. The lady is very close to being a villain, though I could make an argument for her being the anti-hero. But when the Black Company is presented with the opportunity to be heroic, when they have the chance to step into the role of heroism, they do so. And this is characteristic of the anti-hero. It is not enough to just be villainous. You must also have that virtue. You must have that call. Even if you reluctantly answer the call, the anti-hero must answer the call. The anti-hero is what I selected for my Sangwheel Chronicles for my main character, Louis. He is not an assassin with a heart of gold. He is an assassin. He is an assassin who is ordered to kill for whatever reason by his liege lady, and he goes and does that because that's his job. When the call to heroism comes, he isn't the obvious choice for it, but circumstances draw him into that. And if you're interested in reading more about my world and my protagonist, link down below to my first book, The Hidden Blade. So hero and anti-hero are the normal choices for your protagonist, but you can have a villainous protagonist. A great example of this comes from Mark Lawrence's Broken Empire from Jorg. I have heard people argue that Jorg is an anti-hero. No, Jorg is a villain. In the opening scene, Jorg and his company murder hundreds of farmers and then gang rape their wives and set their daughters on fire. These are not the actions of an anti-hero. An anti-hero is a hero who is reluctant to answer the call. Jorg drives the story forward by seeking power. The heinous things that he does is to increase his own power. That's not an anti-hero. That is a villain. Jorg is a villain, and I am willing to die on this hill. So if you disagree with me, I'm very happy to engage in the comments below. So you can write a book from the perspective of a protagonist, but I will say that I was very reluctant to continue the Broken Empire series. I did finish book 1. It was a compelling read, don't get me wrong. But I have not actually yet read book 2. I have been told that it is different and you don't follow Jorg as closely, but reading the villain's perspective was not something that I felt compelled to continue with. For all that the first book was a compelling read, it didn't compel me to continue the story. So if you are going to select the villainous protagonist, you should be aware that there are people who are not going to enjoy that kind of storytelling, and you might very well end up losing them. So here are some notes about where people get mixed up with narrators, protagonists, and main characters. I said earlier that the main character does not have to be the protagonist. A great example of this comes from Catherine Kerr's first 4 books in the Devery series. The main character in these books is Jill. Jill's character growth arc is to go from being a normal girl to being a mighty sorcerer. The first 4 books is basically her accepting that she should become a sorcerer and agreeing to enter training. But Jill doesn't get this as a call. She's not pursuing this. She's reluctant to become a sorcerer. The protagonist, the one who is pursuing the goal, is Nevane. Nevane is also the character that in one of Jill's previous incarnations caused her to be reluctant to enter into this training. What makes Catherine Kerr's book so amazing is that she tells the story through multiple lives. So you have Nevane as a constant, but all the other lives come and go as he tries to get Jill to accept her fate to become a Doomer Master, a sorcerer. And so Jill is the main character, but Nevane is the protagonist who's driving the plot. The point of view character does also not need to be the protagonist. In The Great Gatsby, the book is made fantastic by the fact that the narrator is Nick Carraway, who, through his narration and through his point of view, shows us what a terribly flawed character Jack Gatsby is. And lastly, the narrator does not need to be the protagonist. The Princess Bride is narrated by the grandfather to his sick grandson, but he is in no way actually connected to the protagonist who drives the story of the Princess Bride forward, who is, of course, our 2 main characters from the actual story the grandfather tells. So your protagonist is your driver of story. He is the one that is trying to achieve the goals of the story. He is the one that changes the most over the course of the story. And he is the one without whom the story cannot happen. And that is my take on protagonists in fantasy worlds or otherwise. I hope that you have enjoyed this episode of Just in Time Worlds, and I will see you soon for another one. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up.